Sorry. Can I do my thing with that clicker?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I can start it, but
That's right. Okay, so I should have said this last night. And by the way, being Clint's nephew is sadly the coolest thing about me. So now you know me. I should have said this last night. Everything that we're going to look at this weekend certainly is, I feel like because of technology, is manifesting itself in new ways. But nothing that we look at this weekend is something that if you don't use technology, you don't struggle with. The things that we're going to look at have been problems since the beginning of time, since man was around. But now that technology is growing and improving, we just are able to do these things in ways we haven't been able to do them before. So if you're one of those who, when last night I had people raise their hand, and you don't have a phone, and you don't watch television, and you don't play video games, and you don't even know what a screen is, you're like, that thing that's on front of my house? Get it, like a screen door, guys? Wake up. Wake up. Even if that's you, even if you have been living in a cave and you do not know what technology even is, these are things that are real struggles. But technology makes them easier and sometimes more dangerous. So I want you to think of the person that you... How many of you have any form of social media? Snapchat, Instagram, Twitter, Zanga. What's a Zanga? Come on. Zanga? Does anybody know what Zanga is? I made it. I've made it. I'm old. Guys, Zanga was like the first social media. You added people. What's up? I mean, Zanga was like the poor man's MySpace, so that's why I was there. I didn't have MySpace, thanks. Wasn't cool enough. Yeah, MySpace, Zanga, same thing. Man. Okay, most of you have some form of social media. How many of you have people in your life that you know? Yeah, okay, I just need to make sure everybody knows this is for everybody. Some of you that are on social media may have that friend that posts stuff. Here you go, Clint. This guy. Yeah. Oh, there we go. No, it's just me. Now does it work? Okay, you know what? That doesn't matter. Technology is trying to kill me. Clint's Google is trying to kill me at our house that I'm staying at. I know it. It's memorizing things about me. You know, you say, hey, Google, turn the light on. It turns the light on. Like, hey, Google, do you know who I am? Yes, you're Jeremy. I was like, what? I watched you while you were sleeping last night. Like, what, Google? Technology. They're coming to get you. How many of you have that friend on social media that you know them personally, so you know what their life is really like, but on social media, they set it up to look like everything is perfect? Anybody have that friend? You know, take 45 minutes to take a picture of their drink, and you're like, oh, wow, that drink, you're like, great drink. Most of us do not share, like, the bad things in life. I don't wake up in the morning and look in the mirror and be like, wow, that is rough. Let me go ahead and get a picture of that for Instagram. Hey, everybody, this is me today. Because we were like, ugh. We tend to share our very best on social media, whether that's pictures or what's going on in life. People like to share their successes, things that are going well. If you're like me, you don't ever share pictures of yourself because how are you going to swing that as a success? You can't. So I don't post pictures of me. I post pictures of my beautiful children. That, thank goodness, their mother's beautiful because, yikes. So I want you to think of the fact that everybody shares their best, and so because of that, it becomes easier for us to see into other people's lives and go, wow, I wish I was more like that. I wish I was more like them. I was going to show you some pictures, so you're going to have to use your imagination, okay? Maybe it is somebody on Instagram who is always posting pictures with them and their significant other. You're like, I wish I had somebody to love me, right? For some of you, it will happen. For some of you, just not going to happen. I'm just kidding. You'll find that special someone out there somewhere. Or technology, you will manufacture them. I don't know what the future holds, but you will find someone. But we see that. Maybe it's somebody who is always getting to go on like great vacations, and you're like, oh, here I am at home, and they're at the beach again. Maybe it's your friend who, as soon as they turn 16, their parents bought them a brand new car, and you're 18, and you're like, Mom, Dad, and they're like, get a job. You're like, okay, I can't. I've been applying, and nobody will accept. It's easy to look at other people's lives and be like, oh, man, I wish that was me, and start comparing ourselves with others. And so as we talk about comparisons, we can't talk about comparisons without first talking about contentment. And so if you didn't already when Clint told you, turn over to Philippians chapter 4, and this is kind of be kind of the basis for what we talk about here in this session. Clint already read it, so I'm not going to reread all of it, but Paul says, hey, I've got a secret. I figured it out. I know how to get by in any situation. He does not say, I know how to be content when things are going really well. He says, I know how to be content in any and every situation. He says, I've learned the secret of being filled, going hungry, of having abundance, and suffering need. Okay? So what's the secret? I'm like, Paul, what are you doing? Verse 13, he says, I can do all things through him who strengthens me. This is like a token verse of anyone who ever plays sports. Because like now, since I put Philippians 4:13 on my cheek, I can suddenly dunk. No, it doesn't work that way. Well, I can do all things. Well, you can't do that, Jeremy. We are back, so that's the secret, all right? So in the context of what Paul is saying here, Philippians 4:13 is saying that I can be content in every situation because God is going to give me the strength to do that. And so here is the secret that you need to know if you want to be content in your life, and that is Jesus is all that you need. If you have Jesus in your life, you can be content, or you should be content. If you are caught up in belongings and what relationships you want to have and what job you want to have, and I can't be content until I have those things, you will never be content, ever. But if you are content with knowing that Christ did what he did for us, and that because of that we have eternity waiting for us someday, then you can be content. That's what it takes, all right? And so that's what Paul says. He says, I've lived on the street. You know, I've gone through really rough times. I've also had abundance. When Paul was growing up, and he lived probably in a wealthy Jewish home, had good things, probably had the newest video game system. Wait, I know, I just realized that he doesn't have technology. He had something great. I'm sure it was like a weird game they played that was really expensive back then. I don't know what rich kids in the first century had. I don't know. Thank you. Really nice sandals. Like, oh, those are the newest sandals. Are those Air Jordans? What? Who's Air Jordan? From the Jordan River. Okay? I don't know what I'm even talking about right now, guys. But Paul had times where he had a lot and not so much. He says, I can be content in both situations because I have Christ. So here's that verse. Not that I'm speaking of being in need, for I've learned in whatever situation. I know how to be brought low. I know how to abound. In every circumstance, what does he say? I can do all things through him who strengthens me. You don't have to turn over there, but Hebrews 13, verse 5, I love what he says here because I think it's a good reminder for us on what it takes to be content. Hebrews 13, verse 5, make sure that your character is free from the love of money, being content with what you have, for he himself, talking about God, has said, I will never desert you, nor will I ever forsake you. In other words, God's always with us. We will always have God. We will always have his Son, and we should be content in that. If you can't be content in that fact, you will never be content. You will always want more. Doesn't matter how much money you accumulate for yourself, you'll want more. Doesn't matter how big of a house you get, you're going to want more. Until Jesus and God are all that you need, you will never be content, all right? So I need to plant that seed first because that's going to be foundational to what we talk about. So if that's the secret, then here's the struggle. we as people don't always do a very good job of that because we covet. Does anybody know what it means to covet? Anyone? You've never heard of that word before? Did I invent that word? Maybe I did. Let's turn over to Exodus 20, verse 17. Because I don't believe I did. People just don't use it. People don't walk up to, I really covet you, Clint. You know when I hear people say covet? When people say, I covet your prayers. And I'm like, do we talk that way? Just say, I would really love your prayers, because this is 2019. Exodus 20, verse 17. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or his male servant, or his female servant, or his ox, or his donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor. Some of you are like, I'm golden. I don't think my neighbor even has an ox. So it's going to be pretty easy for me. This is not an exhaustive list. This is God's way of saying, don't covet anything. Whatever your neighbor has, don't covet it. Covet means to look at what somebody else has and say, I wish that were mine. Here's what happens when we begin to make comparisons. So here's Holly, and Holly and I, we know each other. And I see Holly post this little Instagram post about a trip that she's on, and I go, man, I wish I was on that trip. There's nothing wrong with saying, oh, she's in California, and I wish I was in California. That's great. But when I begin to wish she didn't have it, and I did have it, that's what it means to covet, all right? And so when you see your friends post on social media and you start to, has anybody ever felt like negative feelings towards someone just because they have something that you don't? Be honest. Some of you are like, no, I'm a perfect Christian. Thank you, Micah, being honest. A couple years ago, my parents moved to California. I live in Oklahoma City. And let me just tell you guys, I love Oklahoma City. The people are great. But when you come visit Oklahoma City and you're like, hey, what do you do in Oklahoma City? I go, I am currently doing it. It's Oklahoma City. I'm sure I'm slandering people who are offended right now, but it's just fine. This is fine. It's a fine city. And so when my parents moved to California and they're posting pictures on the beach and at In-N-Out Burger, I'm like, I love my parents, but if they fell down the stairs today, it'd be the worst thing. I want them to survive, but I want it to hurt too. Why is it that when we see people that have things we don't have, it begins to make us almost bitter toward them? Because that's what comparisons do. So when we begin to make comparisons, then we begin to covet. And when we begin to covet, we begin to feel bitter towards other people. And when we begin to feel bitter toward people, you know what eventually happens? You hate them. I have people on social media I have had to unfollow because I have a hard time not seeing the things they post and feeling bitter toward them. And not because of anything they've done. People who always seem to have a perfect home. Like, oh, my house is such a mess. And it's perfect except a cup is sitting out. I'm like, why is that cup not spilled? And there aren't any crayons colored on your couch. I don't get it. I have kids. And sometimes I color on the couch because it's fun, right? So I see things like that, and I'm like, I can't look at that. That's how we are as humans. The comparisons happen because there's something in my life that I'm not content with. Like in that situation, I'm not content with the way I'm keeping my own home, so I see the way somebody else does it, and I'm like, that looks really good. You're not content in the fact that you don't have a car, and so when you see people who do, you're like, ooh, man. If they were in a wreck and were fine, but their car was totaled, that would be great. Okay, that's wrong, but that's what coveting eventually does to us, all right? And so Exodus 20:17, very beginning with the Israelites, God says, don't do it. And then in case you were like, well, maybe that's just an Old Testament thing. Luke chapter 12, verse 15, this is what Jesus says. Then he said to them, beware and be on your guard against every form of greed, for not even when one has an abundance does his life consist of his possessions. It doesn't matter how much stuff you have. That's not what life is all about. And so Jesus says, be careful about greed. Be careful about just wanting to accumulate more things because that's not what life is about. We need to be content in what we have. So here's the problem with comparisons. There's these verses that I was supposed to read off the screen, but I read them from the Bible, so I feel better about it. There's some things to consider about comparisons. Number one, usually they are limited comparisons. You know, I have to see every single part of my day, like everything. All the good and the bad, I have to see all of it. But when I get on and look at somebody's Instagram stuff, you know what I'm seeing from them? The very best, right? I heard someone say that social media allows us to look at other people's highlight reels when we see our behind the scenes. Because nobody's like, oh man, this is just terrible, so let me get a picture of this and boast about it to all my friends. Like, oh, my house is trashed, or oh, I don't have a car. Nobody takes a picture of their empty driveway and like, look at what I'm driving. Like, there's no car there. Exactly. I'm a loser. Like, oh, that was an interesting Instagram post. Thank you. I just like to push the edge a little bit. People don't share the bad stuff. We don't do that. And so when I'm looking at somebody else's social media and I'm seeing those things, I am seeing the very best. I'm not seeing the bad stuff. And so they are limited comparisons. So I get to see everybody's best, but I'm going home with this guy. So I have to see the bad stuff. And so when I start looking at other people and go, oh, and they are so lucky because they get to have this and this and this. You know what I'm not seeing? The bad stuff in their life. The things they're dealing with and struggling with. And the fact that they are probably sitting and looking at somebody else going, yeah, I know I've got this car and they don't, but look, at least they've got a good home life. Or, oh, well, they've got a job. Or they've got... Everyone is lacking in some area. But we don't see that. We just see the good things. And so you have to be careful about making comparisons because I'm going to be looking at what Holden posts. I'm like, oh, man, he's got it made. But you know what he's doing? He's looking at somebody else's and saying, wow, I don't have that. And so don't make comparisons because they're limited. You're only seeing the best from everybody else. And then secondly, there is always someone worse off than you. Now I say that, there's got to be somebody at the bottom, right? Because if there's somebody worse off than you, eventually you're going to get to the last guy. And he's like, I'm the end. No one is worse off than me. I don't think they live here. So all of you, you're off the hook. I'm sure it's someone somewhere who has a terrible disease and lives in a hut. So don't think you're the worse off. But there's always someone in a worse situation. I saw this little cartoon one time where there's a guy sitting in a fine car, but he's looking next to him, and there's this guy in a sports car, and he's like, oh, man, I wish I had that car. Then the next frame is a guy who is on a bike on the sidewalk looking over at the guy in the car, and he's like, oh, man, I wish I had a car. Then there's a guy walking down the sidewalk, and he sees the guy on the bike, and he's like, oh, man, I wish I had a bike. And then the last scene is a kid sitting up in a wheelchair in his apartment building looking down at the kid walking, and he's like, man, I wish I could walk. And it's like, you think of the guy in the car, and he's like, oh, man, look, this guy's got it made over here. He's got his sports car. Meanwhile, there's a kid sitting up here in a wheelchair who would just love a chance to be able to walk. And we look at other people and we go, oh, look, they're so much better off than I am. But I don't think we, especially living where we do, with the blessings that we have, I don't think we realize how good we have it. And I'm not making light of the difficulties that you're going through in life, the struggles that you may have. I'm not saying that life is perfect. But guys, there are people out there that are going through much, much worse than I am. Much, much worse than you are. And so when I start making comparisons, I'm like, oh yeah, but look how good they have it. There are people out there that are like, do you understand how good you have it? When Carrie and I first started, when our daughter Darcy was first born, I was freaked out. Like, I just was not ready to be a father at all. I mean, look at me. I lost 15 pounds in the first 2 weeks my child was born. Like, that could kill me. I mean, that's like half my body weight. I was just stressed. And every time Darcy would get sick, I was like, oh, Carrie, like, we're having to put it. And Carrie finally just said, she's like, do you know that there are people whose children are, like, constantly in the hospital for, like, terrible, terrible diseases, and you're here freaking out because our child has a cold? I was like, oh. Yeah, good call. And once I started thinking that, I was like, you know what? Maybe I should probably think better about my situation. Guys, I know there are things that you wish were different in your life, but I promise you, everyone in this room has it better than, I don't know what the percentage is, so I'll make one up. 95% of the world. It's just true. Because there are people who are out there who go without every day. I was about to ask how many of you ate breakfast this morning, but that's still kind of a hot topic. If you have had a meal in the last 24 hours, you are better off than a large part of our world. If you slept in a home last night, even if it was on the floor, some of you, that's all right. You are better off than the majority of our world. So when you make comparisons with other people, like, oh yeah, but they've got this and they've got this, you need to remember that, yeah, they may, but those are limited comparisons. And secondly, there's always going to be someone that's worse off than you, okay? So that's the danger of comparison. So just wrapping this up and just getting back to where we started, the way to fix that is not to just say, well, I won't compare myself with other people. I'm just going to stop doing that. I won't ever get on social media and ever. The only way to get to a point where you stop making those unreasonable comparisons with other people is to be content. To be content with what we talked about in Philippians 4:13. The fact that if I have Christ, He's going to give me the strength to be content in any situation. And like it said in Hebrews 13, if God promises that He will always be with me, that's all I need. He's going to take care of the rest. In Matthew chapters 5 through 7, there's actually lots of different areas that Jesus talks about the idea of being content. But when He's talking about worry, He says, don't worry about all these things. God is going to take care of the things that you need. Now, don't get the things you need mixed up with the things that you want. But if God promises to always be with us and always to give us what we need, that should be enough to make us content. Here's the kicker. If you are struggling with that, guys, if you struggle looking at other people's lives and comparing yourselves with them, I'm just going to say social media is not a good place for you to hang out. It's bad. Because social media it's like a show and tell of everybody's best. It's like, all right, I want everybody to see this awesome food that I just ate. And you're like, oh, cool, man. And I want everybody to see this great vacation that I just went on. Yes, that's so great. I mean, it's just a boast session. It's like, look at what I did. Look how good my hair looks today. Look at this great new dress that I bought. I did not buy a dress, guys. I promise you. But that's what social media is. I'm going to show you the very best. And if you have a hard time being jealous or coveting of other people, maybe you just need to say, I'm going to take some time away from social media until I can be content in my situation. Or if there are people that on social media you find yourself especially becoming bitter toward those people, just unfollow them. Like, it doesn't have to be in a mean way. You don't have to send them a message and say, I'm unfollowing you because you boast too much about your nice stuff. Just unfollow them and be like, hey. And if they ask, be like, oh, sorry. Then don't follow them back. Just say, oh, it's America. I don't have to follow everybody. Stop posting pictures of your lasagna. But it was great lasagna. If you've posted a picture about lasagna in the last little bit, I apologize. That was not directed at you. But if you have a hard time looking at other people and not getting jealous, step away from social media. Just do it. And get to a point in your life where I'm content. Yeah, it'd be nice if I had a better job, but if this is what I've got, I'm going to be content because I know that God's with me. And yeah, it would be nice to have a car, but if I don't have a car, I'm going to be content because I know God is with me. It'd be nice to have that significant other in my life that, I don't know, loves you or whatever you're looking for. Guys, wait. Just wait. Let me just tell you, wait. But you think that, oh, it'd be so great. Yeah, it would, but be content with where you're at. I promise you that when you are content in the life that you have, God gives you blessings. He takes care of you. He does the things that you need. And so if comparisons are a struggle for you, step away from technology for a little bit and get to a place where you can be content with where you are in life. And then you can have those healthy interactions with other people without getting to a point like I was with my parents where you're bitter and you begin to harbor bad feelings for other people just because they have things that you don't have. All right? I can't see that clock, but I'm going to say a prayer for us. Let's pray. Lord, thank you again for this weekend. Thank you for everyone here and this time that we get to spend together. I pray that will be encouraging for us. I pray that it'll be fun for everybody, but most importantly, Lord, I just pray that we can use this time as a time for self-reflection, to look at our own lives and ask if there are areas of weakness that we can improve on, and that through those things we'll lean on you for the strength that we need. Lord, I know it's hard to be content sometimes. I know it can be so difficult to just stop looking at what others have and to be content with the things we have in life, Lord. But help us to remember that you will always be with us, that you always take care of us. And if those things are true, that we can be content no matter the situation. Lord, I pray that you'll bless us throughout the rest of today and keep us safe. It's in your Son's name we pray. Amen.